Cool.
All right, you know what it is. It is another edition of the Big Douglas Show. This is Opposition Wednesday. It's a weird week. It actually is on a Wednesday. A lot of things have been moved around. Today, to represent the Bear side of things, is Dave Kluge. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Pretty excited about this show. We get to have a very non-biased discussion on this game tomorrow. I assume that our fandom will not get in the way whatsoever.
Obviously not. David, it's interesting. This is a show a couple of months in the making. During the off season, this is when we typically were doing fantasy football, and I reached out to you. Interesting summer for you, health wise. Interesting summer for me, health wise. And I really appreciate that you reached back out to me and said, "Hey, let's do something and make it happen." So, first off, are you healthy?
I sure am. Check out this range of motion. We're back to 100%. That arm's moving. It's sliding. It's feeling good. I'm throwing again. Starting to get back into some rock climbing. But yeah, man, I would not wish shoulder recovery or shoulder surgery recovery on my worst enemy. It is terrible. I did not realize what I was getting into with that injury, but we are good to go now.
Excellent. Let's see how you are with the fantasy guys for fantasy football. How did you get into fantasy, and how long you been at it?
So I started doing this like a lot of other people, just kind of as a side hustle. I've always really liked fantasy football. So I started writing stuff on Reddit. I was basically writing full articles that I was just doing in text posts on Reddit, and they were anonymous at the time. And for me, it was just kind of fun, a fun way to blow off some steam. And, it's something that I've always loved playing. I've been playing fantasy football since I was a little kid. Then one day somebody reached out to me from Fantasy Pros and said, "Hey, we can use some extra writers on staff over here." So in my head, I immediately thought that I was going to, be the next Mike Tagliere and, get this gaudy job over at Fantasy Pros. Turns out I was at the very bottom of the totem pole. I started doing game recaps and injury updates for the NBA. Did that for a few years. Then I got into MLB coverage. And then once I started doing NFL, a lot of people at Fantasy Pros were like, "Dude, you need to get on Twitter. There's this whole network of people on Twitter that talk football all the time." So I got on football in the 2020 offseason, and that's when I kind of decided, I think this is something I want to do more than just a part-time hustle. Really put my pedal to the metal. Started creating a ton of content, did 500 shows within my first year, was consistently writing articles, trying to tweet and all that whatnot. And then linked up with Joe Bryant, and I've been a big fan of Football Guys since I was in high school. So Joe Bryant and I, we were able to work something out where I came on as a contributor. From there, my role with Football Guys has just kind of grown, and I'm pretty happy to say that I've been doing this full time for about a year and a half now.
Let's see. You're in Colorado now, is that right?
Yep.
You're from there, or you're from? How did you become a Bears fan? I guess.
Born and raised in Chicago, so it was never even a question. I had to be a Bears fan when I was born. Funny story. My grandpa walked my mother down the aisle, and when he handed my mom over to my dad, he said, "Remember, Sundays are for football." So, I mean, I didn't really have a choice. We had season tickets growing up. I've been going to Bears games since I was a little kid. So moved out to Colorado with my wife, well, girlfriend at the time, now wife, but we moved out here going on 5 years now. It's been a little while, and you can take the kid out of Chicago, but you can't take the Chicago out of the kid.
That's right. And I'm assuming that the Chicago style is the appropriate way to eat pizza and hot dogs.
Yeah, so let me just talk about Chicago pizza for a quick second, if you'll allow me to get on
Please.
a soapbox here. Everybody has this conception that Chicago pizza is the big, thick, deep dish pizza that you see there. That is the tourist Chicago pizza. Most
Okay.
Chicagoans I know don't eat deep dish pizza. They've got Giordano's and Luminati's and these restaurants that are well known for it in downtown Chicago. So people come visit Chicago and they eat it. But really, the pizza that most Chicagoans I know eat, especially on the south side of Chicago, it's this really, really thin, like cracker style pizza almost. They call it tavern style. It was actually made in Columbus, Ohio, found its way over to Chicago a while back. But it's, a pizza that's sliced up into squares rather than into triangles. And it's just this, really thin, saucy pizza, ton of grease on top, and huge chunky toppings. When I think of Chicago pizza, that's what I think of. I hardly ever ate deep dish while I lived in Chicago.
All right. I love that. And pickle, Chicago style dogs has a pickle on it. I like that. Do you?
Oh, I love it. Pickle, sports pepper, celery salt, relish, mustard, all of it. I love a Chicago hot dog. I think it's just such a good balance of flavor. A lot of people too get turned off by the pickle, though. It is kind of weird having a full pickle spear on a hot dog, but it's the only way I'll eat them.
You can put a pickle on just about anything, and I'm down for it.
Yep.
All right, let's get to a little bit of football. Are the Bears in a rebuild? What's going on there? I took a look at the roster before we got started for this today, and I got to tell you, there's not a lot of names that I recognize. A couple guys in the back end. Anybody watching this show knows I'm a huge Dogs fan, so obviously I know about Roquan.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys that I thought were on that team, not on the team anymore, were hurt. What's going on?
So this is the first time. This is an unbelievable stat. I pulled this up over the summer, and I couldn't believe it. I had to fact check like 20 times because with the Chicago Bears being this storied franchise that's been around for well over 100 years now, this is the first season ever in Chicago Bears history where they have had a new GM, a new head coach, and a new week one starting quarterback. It's never happened in NFL history. So now we got Ryan Poles in here as GM. We got Matt Eberflus as the head coach, and Justin Fields as the week one starter. And this is the first time that they have ever really committed to a full rebuild. So Chicago fans are getting all worked up because we're losing some close games and whatnot. But I went into the season with no expectations whatsoever. I was expecting 3 to 4 wins at most, and if I'm being kind of honest, I'm a little bit upset that they beat the Houston Texans. That's a team that we're probably going to be lobbying for a top draft pick against, and us beating them does nothing but hurt our draft position next year. So this year is nothing but cleanup. We still have a lot of dead money on the books. We traded away Khalil Mack and we're able to get some picks in return, but we're still paying the majority of his contract. So this year we don't have a lot of cap space. Didn't have a first round pick either. If you remember, we traded away our first round pick for Justin Fields. So no first round pick. We had 2 seconds. And then even with those second round picks, I think if this team had any, desire to win this year, they would have done the obvious thing. And I know you said you're a Dogs fan, George Pickens. I mean, this team was desperate for a wide receiver. We passed on George Pickens twice, but I think with them going pure BPA, best player available, it shows that they are committing to a rebuild. And they took Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon in the first 2 rounds with their first, or in the second round with their first 2 picks. And that just shows that they have no intention of winning this year. Now, that doesn't mean that I think they're completely giving up on Justin Fields like the mainstream media has made it sound. I think that this is just a year where they are trying to instill a new culture and see what players they have. The offensive line has been a wreck, but we've seen some flashes in the offensive line with guys who do have a little bit of promise. Going into next year, the Bears are going to have over $100 million in cap space. They're also going to have a top draft pick in what is looking like it's going to be a pretty loaded 2023 class. So this is I've kind of been, what I've been calling this is a soft rebuild. We've already got Justin Fields, who I think the fan base, the media, and the front office all has a little bit of faith in, despite some of the struggles that we've seen so far. You already talked about Roquan Smith, one of the most dynamic linebackers in the NFL. We've got Eddie Jackson. We've got David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert coming out of the backfield. We got Darnell Mooney still on a rookie contract. So we have a lot of talented players that are still on small rookie deals. So I think that next year, with a high draft pick, they can get a guy like Keyshawn Butte or Jackson Smith-Njigba, and that should be enough to address the wide receiver room. Then they go out and splash some money in free agency to fill in the offensive line and some holes that we have on defense. So this year, no expectations whatsoever, but I think that the Chicago Bears are a little bit closer to contention than people realize.
I loved the Justin Fields pick, not just because of his connection to Georgia, but just because I thought he was the best quarterback in that draft outside of Trevor Lawrence. That's me personally. I actually had hoped that the Commanders would spend the same first-round pick that you guys did to move up for him. To me, it was a steal. He's only, what is this, his 3rd year now? Second, right.
And if you remember last year, he didn't really start all that much. Andy Dalton was the week 1 starter last year. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Doug.
No, you're fine. No, I was just saying, I think it's fortunate for you guys actually to have him, because next year really is not the year to need a quarterback, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know how high you are on CJ Stroud, and I tried not to do this. I tried not to evaluate the helmet, but OSU quarterbacks make me nervous. I mean, that's just what it is. Like I try to say don't scout the helmet, and I know that I'm now saying I'm scouting the helmet. OSU quarterbacks make me nervous, and Bryce Young's small frame makes me nervous. So, I mean, it's actually a great year to not need a quarterback if you're a Bears fan.
Yeah, and I agree. And the one thing I'll say about Justin Fields is, I already talked about how Andy Dalton was the week 1 starter. a lot of people didn't have Justin Fields pegged as, the Trevor Lawrence type where he was pro ready and ready to go week 1 straight out of the draft. A lot of people said that Justin Fields would benefit from some time on the bench, and that was the Bears' plan. That's why they had Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton was supposed to lead the offense, and then, Justin Fields, whether it was in week 2 or maybe the last few weeks of the season, that's when we expected Justin Fields to come out and play. But Andy Dalton got hurt before halftime in week 2, so Justin Fields had no offseason reps with the first team whatsoever. Kind of a head scratching decision from Matt Nagy, but that's what Matt Nagy did last year. So, Allen Robinson, who is a possession receiver that really needs to work on trust and chemistry with his quarterback. That's why he was completely non-existent, once Justin Fields came in. And that's why Darnell Mooney became the guy, because Darnell Mooney was getting reps with the second team. He built up some chemistry with Justin Fields. So, week 1 was the Bears didn't look terrible last year. Andy Dalton was commanding the offense. Allen Robinson pulled 11 targets, and then Justin Fields came in week 2 and clearly was not ready. And I think that kind of hurt his development a little bit, getting thrown out there earlier than he was ready to. And it's tough because you see guys like Justin Herbert who are unexpectedly thrown into a game and just immediately look like a generational talent. But that is the outlier. Most guys need that time to develop in NFL practices. So I think he got the short end of the stick last year. And now this year with a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new general manager, new weapons on offense, all of this stuff. Again, he's kind of getting the short end of the stick here. But I was talking with Matt Waldman about this yesterday, and I'm just hoping that these missteps by the Chicago Bears front office aren't going to completely destroy his development. When you talk to a lot of scouts, Trent Dilfer has been talking about this all season. I mean, Justin Fields still has everything you want to see in a can't miss prospect. And I'm just hoping that these 2 years of struggles aren't going to set him back far enough that he won't be able to still develop.
Eberflus in as the head coach. The offensive coordinator was the quarterback coach for Green Bay. Is that right? What is the plan on offense?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I thought that this was going to, I thought that they were going to let Justin Fields do Justin Field things, roll him out and get him in space and let him run the ball a lot. But this has been an archaic offense. I'm not sure if you've looked at the numbers, Doug, but we are basically running an offense that the NFL hasn't seen since, pre-World War II. This team is just going out there and pounding the rock. I forget the exact number, but I saw it this morning. Justin Fields has attempted, I believe it was 88 pass attempts, which is the lowest number of pass attempts since like 1950 something. So they have him on a very, very short leash. And that's kind of a polarizing conversation among Chicago fans because you've got some people saying, hey, this is clearly a rebuild year. Let's just keep him on a short leash, go through the motions, work on the basics and hope that helps him going in next year. And then other people are saying, let this guy run around and do what he does best, showcase his athleticism, build up some confidence, make some of those big throws. And to be completely honest, I don't have the right answer. I don't know what the best thing to do. I don't know if we're doing the right thing by keeping him on a short leash or if we should just let him run free. But this is the choice that the front office and the coaching staff has made, and we just kind of have to live with it.
It's funny because, Dave, because before we got started, I mentioned you this feels like one of those Spider-Man memes where, they're pointing at each other. The quarterback situation is so different and yet so much the same. Like Carson Wentz, the offensive coordinator, admitted he's not allowed to make audibles at the line and checks, literally just to move the line, which means to me, they have no, they don't trust him to do it, which is frustrating. And it sounds like, is that the same thing that's going on there, or it's just simply that the offensive scheme is so limited that it's just a whole lot of running? Is Herbert's the starter now at running back?
Only because David Montgomery was injured.
Sure.
So Montgomery,
Montgomery's not playing Thursday, right?
Still on the fence. It looks like he might be playing. Yeah, I haven't checked. I think it's really going to hinge on whether he is able to practice today or not. That's really what it's going to come down to. But Herbert has been great in relief, and even Tristan Ebner, a guy that we drafted late this year. I don't know what it is. I don't know who is scouting running backs for the Bears, but you can go back over the last 15, 20 years. The Bears just seem to hit on running backs. I mean, going back to Jeremy Langford, who they drafted in the 7th round. We got a good year out of Jeremy Langford while we were rebuilding. And then Jordan Howard immediately after that. And then David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert, Tristan Ebner. This team, Tariq Cohen, this team does pretty well at scouting running backs. So I think that is, the strength and the offense. I mean, you look at that wide receiver room. a casual NFL fan wouldn't recognize a single name outside of Darnell Mooney. I mean, we're looking at Byron Pringle and Equanimous St. Brown and Velus Jones Jr. and Dante Pettis. I don't even know which one of those guys is a wide receiver too, but one of those four guys has to establish himself because right now it's been, Darnell Mooney getting 4 targets a game and nobody else in the wide receiver room doing much of anything at all outside of a big play here and there.
I saw Dante Pettis on there, and I was like, wow, that's a flash from the past. I didn't even know he was still in the league.
Yeah,
My
actually had a
brother,
big touchdown in week 1 against San Francisco, and it
I
was
really thought he was going to be great coming out of college. Like that's
yeah,
not a knock on him or the franchise. I thought he could play it. I like Velus Jones. My brother is a Tennessee Vols fan, which is a totally different story. Alumni, even. So I know about Velus Jones. I like him. I think he's got something to offer. It's just an extremely young team. The Eberflus in. What does the defense look like?
The defense has been surprisingly good, and we have a new defensive coordinator this well as year, or a new offensive coordinator this year as well. I mean, like I said, this team completely gutted everything. As long as I've been a Bears fan, I've never seen this. And then when I looked historically, this has never happened in Bears history. So the defense right now, they've got a lot of playmakers on defense, but they did lose Danny Trevathan, which was a tough loss. They had who was it that Alec Ogletree, they lost him as well. They obviously traded away Khalil Mack. We had Eddie Goldman retire unexpectedly. So we lost a lot of pieces on defense. And I thought that was going to be a huge weakness for us. But when you've got Roquan Smith and Eddie Jackson and Robert Quinn, who is still doing it somehow, like
Amazing.
in his mid-30s, still just putting up great numbers, they've got enough pieces on defense that they've been looking decent. And that's why they're still hanging in all of these games where I thought they'd be, winless at this point in the season. They're still able to squeak out some wins because of that defense. And then, like I said, the 2 draft picks that they had in the second round, which, were not team needs whatsoever. We already had Jalen Johnson, who was a great quarterback. So Kyler Gordon didn't make a ton of sense, but he's been looking fantastic. And Jaquan Brisker, I'm not sure how familiar you are with him, but that's the type of safety that I love to have, especially balanced with Eddie Jackson. Eddie Jackson is your ball hawk, your big play, your interception guy. And then you've got Jaquan Brisker, who can play in the box and just lay out running backs. He can rush the quarterback. He can hit people in the open field. He can do coverage. He does a little bit of everything. I think Jaquan Brisker was actually one of the best steals in this year's draft. So the defense has been the bright spot on this Bears team and the reason that we're still hanging in some of these games.
Jaquan Brisker was one of my favorites in the draft. People in Washington really wanted him when they went receiver in round 1. I think people thought that they were prime time for Brisker in the second. A lot of people disappointed that he didn't end up in Washington. And to your point, Eddie Jackson is one of my favorite players in the league. Maybe top handful of guys that play in that position. Were you surprised? I know Roquan kind of mentioned that he may have preferred to play elsewhere. Were you surprised they weren't able to get something done for him? Are you surprised he's still there? I'm not surprised that when the season started, he didn't make us think about it anymore because that's who he is. But were you surprised that he's still on the roster?
I'm surprised that he didn't get any contract that he wanted. I mean, Roquan Smith should have been the guy that walked into the front office and said, "This is my number, pay me." And they should have bowed down and, "Yes, Roquan, we're going to give you whatever you want." And then especially when you look at Eberflus and Alan Williams coming over from Indianapolis, I mean, Roquan Smith reminds me so much of Shaq Leonard. I almost said Darius Leonard. Shaq Leonard reminds me so much of him. So
also, can I just say, not to cut you off, but I was so confused for like the first week of the season. Like, who are we talking about here? I didn't get the memo about the change to Shaq, but at any rate, sorry.
No, same exact thing here. That kind of took me by confusion. But, you look at Roquan's style of play and you look at Leonard's style of play, and they're very similar linebackers. They're not the
They're the
coverage guys.
They're the new linebacker in the NFL that can fly sideline to sideline, right?
Yep. I put them up there with Fred Warner and Bobby Wagner as some of the best linebackers in the league. So when you see Eberflus and Alan Williams, Eberflus was hired first as the head coach, and then he hand-selected Alan Williams, brought him over from Indianapolis as well to be the defensive coordinator. It just made so much sense that they've got a young Roquan Smith. Why not give him the bag and build around him the same way that they built around Leonard in Indianapolis? So the fact that they were playing hardball with him, especially when a lot of fans weren't too happy with the hires to begin with, and then this new front office comes in and is playing hardball with a fan favorite in Roquan, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I'm glad that Roquan, went through the motions and he's still out there and he's playing and he's doing his thing. But I got to be honest, man, I'm going to be upset, like legitimately upset, if they don't give him a big time contract this offseason.
Let's switch to fantasy a little bit. Who are some guys in this game that you recommend that we could pick up for daily fantasy? Are there any
Yeah,
that
the
you
the
like in this game?
Washington defense and special teams and the Chicago defense and special teams. I think those are the two that we should be starting with confidence in this game. I mean, we know how sloppy Thursday night games are. It's become a joke at this point, and like we always try to convince ourselves maybe this Thursday game is going to be different. And you fire up I'm sure you've done it, Doug. Right before kickoff, you tinker with your lineup a little bit, and hey, let me throw this guy in on Thursday night. Let me play this wide receiver that I probably shouldn't be playing, but I want to have a little skin in this Thursday night game, and it never works out. So I tweeted just a few days ago, yeah, Justin Fields looked good last week. Carson Wentz is the QB9 on the season. But this is the Thursday game. We got the short week, two sloppy teams with pretty good defenses. I'm not even starting quarterbacks with confidence. If I have Carson Wentz in a team where I've been confidently starting him and getting back end QB1 numbers, I think this is a week where I'd go to the waiver wire and try to pick up a Geno Smith or a Trevor Lawrence or somebody else. I think, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if this is a 7-10 final score where one of those two touchdowns came on a kickoff or a, defensive touchdown. I think it's going to be a pretty sloppy, gross game. Looking at the Commanders wide receiver room, though, I guess that's the one place, obviously you're starting the Bears running backs, whether it's David Montgomery or Khalil Herbert, you're going to start them just because they're going to get volume. Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, getting a little muddy there. I don't even know who I'm starting between those two. But I think the one guy in Washington out of the wide receiver room that I am very confident in is Curtis Samuel. And it's just because of the usage that he's been getting. Doug, I don't want to hurt your feelings here, but I've never really been a big fan of Terry McLaurin. I've just always thought that he's been a little bit overrated, overdrafted in fantasy circles. And here we are heading into week 6, and he's yet to give us anything better than a top 24 week. And it looks like Curtis Samuel is just the better wide receiver right now. And the role that he is getting is so similar to what we've seen with Deebo Samuel, where he's getting runs, on jet sweeps and between the tackles. And they're kind of doing whatever they can to get the ball in his hands. So if there was one guy that I'd feel confident starting, it would have to be Curtis Samuel.
Now, the fan base here is very upset at you right now for your comments about Terry McLaurin. He is the first son of Washington at the moment, and they are not interested in hearing that. But I tell you what, it's not hard to argue that his usage has gone way down. I mean, the first game they tried to find him in screens and action and make sure that he got balls, and they have yet to do that recently. So I totally, certainly from a fantasy standpoint, get it, because folks that drafted him thinking that he was going to be the guy from the last 2 years in the guy. He's seen a lot more double teams now, and they've got a lot more places to go. I mean, when Jahan Dotson was on the field, 4 touchdowns through the first 4 games. Now, Hammy's out, but the guy they drafted last year,
Miami Brown,
it looked great the other day. It was so sad. I talked about this all offseason. I felt bad for Diami. You only feel so bad for a guy because he didn't work hard enough, it sounds like, to really get a feel for the game. But the quarterback that Washington had last year didn't really do what Diami Brown does. And you can see now that he's got a guy that can push the ball down the field. That's what he does. He runs fast in one direction.
Yeah, and I just tweeted this out the other day, Doug. I don't know if you saw it, but I did a number of top 20 wide receiver weeks in PPR fantasy scoring this year. Curtis Samuel's got 2. Jahan Dotson's got 2. Diami Brown's got 1. Terry McLaurin is 0. I mean, it's just wild to see how Terry McLaurin, this guy with all the promise in the world, he struggled a little bit with injuries and bad quarterback play. And now they finally have, I'm not sitting here saying that Carson Wentz is an all-time talent by any means, but he's probably the best quarterback that the Commanders have had in the last, 5 to 8 years since Kirk Cousins. And now that Terry McLaurin finally has this quarterback who should be able to unlock him, he's having one of his worst seasons ever. It's kind of mind-numbing and frustrating to see, especially after getting that extension.
It is. And with the quarterback, it's been frustrating. And I get that, he went from Philly to Indianapolis that is basically running the same kind of system, if not the exact same system. So I understand this is the first time that he's doing something totally new as far as scheme goes. But he looks old in the pocket. He holds the ball like as I'm watching Wentz a lot now. I mean, I remember him just dogging us when he was at Philly. But seeing him now, the legs aren't quite the same. He gets tracked down in a way that he did not before. I'm with you. I think this is like a very slot. They're always sloppy. Chris Baker, former Redskins defensive tackle, is on with me every Monday, and he said, when you're done with a game on Sunday, by the time the Toradol and the rest of the drugs wear off, it's Wednesday before you hit the training room and say, oh, wow, I got this twinge in my back. Where'd that come from? Which is why these Thursday games are just, I mean, listen, I'll take football every day of the week. But from an actual, value standpoint, getting a good game, getting a good product, it's been rough. The Bears will put out the brand new orange helmets. Is this something you're into? Do you care about the uniforms? Where you stand on that?
I feel like they always try out these new uniforms on Thursday, and I don't know if it's just like a marketing thing, but they always get like just memed like crazy, and I'm just anticipating it to happen. I don't know if you saw Roquan Smith. He's like, "Yeah, cool. We get to go out on the field looking like highlighters." Do you remember? I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago. No, it was last year with the Seahawks, and they rolled out those lime green
Uh,
jerseys that were like messing with people's TVs. They were so bright. I think it's going to be something similar. I'm not a big fan of these color rush jerseys that they roll out on Thursdays. Yeah. So
you,
I don't think it makes a difference. Excited
you
to see something new, but yeah.
you mentioned the Seahawks. Geno Smith. Geno Smith. What year is it? You know what I mean? Like I don't even understand what's going on. And then Russell Wilson looks washed. I mean, as a Commander fan who was dying to give up 3 first-round picks for Russell Wilson, I kind of feel like I went to sleep and woke up and hit the lottery. And
Yeah.
they didn't even know it. And Geno Smith is just unbelievable.
Yeah, this has got to be the most bizarre storyline of the entire season so far. I mean, Russell Wilson, they gave him $250 million before he ever even played his first game in Denver. And yeah, I'm a Bears fan, but like we said, I'm in Colorado. I'm just a little bit north of Denver. Doug, people were shooting off fireworks in my neighborhood when that news came out. When the news came out that the Broncos traded for Russell Wilson, my neighbors were shooting off fireworks. People were, going crazy in the street. You saw everybody repping Broncos hats and jerseys, whatever it was. People were so fired up out here. And I can't understand what's going on. And Nathaniel Hackett gets a lot of the blame, especially because that first game was a very it was a primetime game Monday night, and he just peed his pants when it mattered most, at the end of the game, just made some terrible, terrible calls. And because of that, I think that everybody is pushing the blame on Nathaniel Hackett. But Russ Wilson has just been flat out terrible. I mean, I just can't understand it. I just wrote about Russell Wilson yesterday, and he's not making those easy throws on passes that are going 0 to 9 yards downfield. So the very short parts of the field, those easy passes that we expect, a $250 million quarterback to be able to make. He ranks third worst in the NFL right now. The only quarterbacks that have a lower completion rating on these short passes are Justin Fields and Baker Mayfield. I mean, it's bad. And then you look at the moon balls, those deep balls that Russ made a living off of in Seattle, just chucking these deep balls downfield. He has the lowest completion percentage of his career on deep balls. So I don't know what's going on. I genuinely don't know what's going on. I cracked a joke the other day. It's like Space Jam, where the aliens came and just sucked all of his power out of him. I mean, that's what's happening with Russell Wilson. He is a shell of himself. It is just mind-numbing to see what's going on.
Give us a couple of waiver wire pickups that you like for this week. Help us win our fantasy games.
I mean, everybody's been talking about Kenneth Walker. If Kenneth Walker's in your league and he is available, drop everything you got on him. My wife in one of her leagues, she asked me last night, "Hey, Kenneth Walker's still available. What do I do?" I said, "How much do you have left?" And she goes, "I got $100 left." I said, "Well, you put 100 on Kenneth Walker." And she did, and she got Kenneth Walker. I think he's going to be a top 15 guy for the rest of the season. I mean, he is good. Very, very good. Getting into deeper leagues, though, a guy that I really like, and the cat might be out of the bag a little bit already because we saw it already last week, but Deion Jackson is a very, very good running back, and everybody thinks that Nyheim Hines was going to be the guy. Nyheim Hines was knocked out of the game, so they had to just keep moving down the depth chart all the way to Deion Jackson, but with his opportunity, he looked fantastic. So I don't know if Jonathan Taylor's coming back this week. I don't know if he's expected to miss any more time than that going forward. But Deion Jackson's a guy that should be stashed in just about every single league. And this is something I've been talking a lot about on Twitter lately, and I've been talking about it a lot on my shows. Really, if you're looking for anybody to stash on the waiver wire, It's just backup running backs. I mean, it really isn't harder than it has to be. Go through a depth chart. Whoever is the number 2 running back, pick them up. Even if it's a guy that is not putting up any points right now. Deonta Foreman is getting almost no snaps
Mhm.
right now in Carolina. But if something happens to Christian McCaffrey, he's going to. Kenneth Walker, who really wasn't doing too much when Rashad Penny was healthy. He should have been stashed on your bench in the just for the chance that this could
Mhm.
have happened. And the people that stashed Kenneth Walker, awesome. Now they are looking at a top 15 running back for the rest of the season, and they didn't have to blow all their fab like other people who are going out and spending 100% of their fab on it. So I put together a list the other day of guys that I see as handcuffs that should be drafted every single where or in every single league, at least stashed, even if you're not playing them for the time being. Benjamin, Zach Moss, Isaiah Pacheco, Zamir White, Jalen Warren, Hassan Haskins, Matt Breida, Rex Burkhead, Samaje Perine, Deonta Foreman, not the sexiest names, and they're not guys that are going to contribute immediately. But even if you are already set at running backs, you should have some of these guys stashed on your bench, because then in the event of an injury to the guy ahead of him, you've either got a top 15, top 20 running back that you can plug into your flex position, or you've got a very valuable trade piece that you can put on the market where you can try to upgrade some other positions. So the way I play fantasy football, I add up however many wide receiver spots and flex spots there are. I add those up. I'll add 1 to that number, and I'm not rostering any more wide receivers than that. If I can start 3 wide receivers in a flex, I'm not holding more than 5 wide receivers. If I can start 3 wide receivers and 3 flexes, I'm not holding more than 7 wide receivers. I just don't see the benefit to having wide receivers clogging up my roster. I want my entire bench to be full of guys with contingent upside at the running back position.
And to your point about the kid from Carolina, if in fact they end up moving McCaffrey, then all of a sudden he's actually running back 1 for the rest of the season. Um,
Exactly.
let's see. Let's 2 more. How are you doing in the Scott Fishbowl?
Oh, I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but I am 8-2 and crushing it right now in Scott Fishbowl. My start at the 1-2 turn, I got Kyler Murray with my first pick and Jalen Hurts with my second pick, and then I stacked up Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. So I'm just confidently starting both of those guys as my wide receivers every single week, and it kind of swings back and forth. You get an AJ Brown week, and then you get a Devonta Smith week, but I got that stack with Jalen Hurts, and it's been treating me pretty well so far. Also got Austin Eckler, which has been really nice. He slid all the way to the front of the 3rd round with that 3rd round reversal. So got an amazing steal with Austin Eckler there as my RB1. I did lose Rashad Penny this week, so that's going to hurt a little bit. Rashad Penny was a guy that seemingly nobody wanted to draft. I waited until the 10th round and got Rashad Penny, but losing him is going to be a little bit of a blow. The tough thing for me though has been my tight end room. I thought that I was slick waiting on tight ends, and I think I just waited a little bit too long. I've got Zach Ertz, and Zach Ertz has been doing very well for me, and I've got him stacked up with Kyler Murray, but I'm a little bit concerned that once DeAndre Hopkins comes back, that is going to negatively impact Zach Ertz. So 8-2 right now, got a bunch of points scored, but it seems like, so many other fantasy teams right now where things are just slowly starting to fall apart piece by piece.
It's that time of the year. And let's wrap with this, Dave. What do you expect the game to look like tomorrow night? And maybe a score prediction.
I mean, I said 10-7 earlier, and that was a little bit of a joke. I don't think it's going to be that low scoring, but man, I think this is going to be a pretty low scoring game. I'm betting the under. I'm starting both Washington's defense and Chicago's defense in a few different fantasy leagues. So my final prediction, I will go 16-13 Washington.
In a barn burner.
Yes. And like I said, at least one of those touchdowns is coming on defense or special teams.
The Commanders have not gotten very many turnovers, so that sounds like something the Bears will be doing. Dave, this was great. It was a long time in the making. Tell the folks at home what you got coming up and where to find you.
Yeah, really simple nowadays. Just find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see all the shows that I'm doing. I host 4 shows a week. I've also got short videos that I do, write a couple articles every single week, do a ton of guest spots. So yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. You'll see everything I'm up to, and you can find all of my written and video content over at footballguys.com.
And the E wasn't silent, so my bad on that.
Yeah, no worries, man. Nobody gets the name right. It is Dave Kluge, Kluge.
Thanks, buddy. I had a great time today.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.